Hey, there we go. OBS finally decided to work. Kind of thought about it for a minute. Ooh. Where is...
Oh man, that's so beautiful. No cabin though.
Oh, I need to start the bot too. Let me tweet first.
My Glock rails came in.
Is there an inside joke I'm missing? Like, why is Chris Steven?
Oh god.
Because Discord's moving things around now.
Yeah, Discord's fucked with stuff.
Okay,
No,
nice.
can you just keep a fake name there, dude?
Yeah, we just go with whatever name like just happens to show up on us.
I just
So it's
randomly
like
generate 4 names each week.
Hey, I'm Steven.
That'd be hilarious.
This is no
Chris,
longer winter.
Your bed is so neatly
spring.
made.
Mine is.
Yeah,
Yeah, that doesn't take much.
it looks peaceful.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the tweet.
My apartment's a fucking mess.
Is that a bathroom through that door behind you? I just want to tour Chris's place now.
Yeah, this door's bathroom, that door is living.
Nice. That's awesome.
What did I say
This
I was
is
going
a-
to do after I tweeted? Start the bot.
Talk about some anime. That's what
What the
I do
fuck?
after I tweet.
What's that WhatsApp thing you tweeted, Ryan?
Oh, WhatsApp is suing NSO for hacking them.
I hate when that happens.
And also for breach of terms of service. And NSO is saying they can't be sued because they're a government agency or something to that effect.
Oh my.
I'm pretty sure that's not how that works.
It might be. Could be qualified immunity under that.
I mean, people sue government agencies all the time,
Yeah.
I think
It's rare
like
to
the
win.
police.
Qualified immunity blocks a lot of those cases too. They could easily claim that they have authority to do shit under under the NDAA and the Patriot Act, and
well, I think
they're immune
the
and who
issue
cares?
here is they don't actually work for the US government. They work for like external governments, and I don't remember. I read the whole thing and I've forgotten.
So it's diplomatic immunity.
it'd be difficult to. Well, maybe you could get him in court, but depends on who's sponsoring.
It's like Catch Me Outside, except it's Catch Me in Court.
My impression from that article is that they already have them in court.
Yeah, it looks like they. I'm looking through.
Oh. That wasn't me. I have all Discord sounds muted.
It was probably me. It always fires up on this other machine when it shouldn't.
All right, should we get started?
Let's do it.
Yes.
Welcome to AniFiles, episode 93. I'm your host, Ryan. With us today we have Chris,
Hello.
Dean,
Yes.
and special guest Tzvi.
Hey, it's me, Steven.
We have a bunch of good shows and then another show to talk about today. And when we talk about our shows, we have a very specific and regimented way we talk about them. It's very structured.
Is it?
No, it's not.
Oh,
but we
okay.
pretend, and this is how we pretend.
I was about to play the intro to my show. Here we go. This is the one I wanted to play.
Here's how the AniFiles rating system works. Our hosts and guests have watched the first episode of the shows we're talking about today. Based on only that first episode, we'll answer 5 yes or no questions. Did the premise interest you? Did the production impress you? Did the storytelling impress you? Did you enjoy the first episode? Did the first episode make you interested to see more? The way we interpret the word impress can make the AniFiles rating system tougher than some. Being decent or merely good won't be enough to stand out, and some of us may have higher standards than others. Each question answered yes earns the show 1 point, adding up to a total between 0 and 5 per host. All of our scores are then combined to derive a cumulative score between 0 and 100%, letting you know at a glance if we collectively liked the show. And now, let's get to our first show.
The first show we have to talk about is Diary of Our Days at the Breakwater. Chris, will you tell us about the show?
Yes, I will. And because we're a little bit short on time today, we are going to be speeding through things a little faster than usual. So if you hear me shout at someone about 5-minute warnings or something like that, just be forewarned. That's a thing that will happen today.
All right, Chris, that's a 5-minute warning for you.
Yes, indeed. So Diary of Our Days at the Breakwater is a slice of life comedy about a schoolgirl who just entered high school, and she just also moved into the country. So she's a city gal who's now experiencing kind of country life. I think it's also she said that like she lived there before when she was younger, and then maybe moved away and now is coming back.
I think it was that like she visited there over the summer.
Yeah, she'd visited because she had family, like her dad grew up there or something.
That makes some sense, yeah. Because she does have an acquaintance there that she runs into later. But yeah, she goes to school, and her big hobby is she is really into sewing plushies and stuff like that. So she likes knitting and sewing and all that fun stuff. And that's what she wants to do. But then when she is out and about one day before school gets started, she sees someone who looks like she reads it as them possibly having a heat stroke or something like that. And so she rushes over to try to help them, but it turns out, no, she was just looking for a good spot to fish. And so she introduces her to fishing, specifically octopus in this case. So they like dangle a string down, and she also is very afraid of bugs. She constantly comes across wharf roaches and stuff like that. And
that I could only identify because of Animal Crossing.
Same. So yeah, wharf roaches happen, and so she's like, trying out the octopus thing, and she pulls it up, and she's like, oh my god, I did not expect this, because the girl didn't tell her what she was fishing. And then it starts turning into tentacle porn briefly.
Just
and,
for a moment.
And the girl that she's met here on the breakwater basically coerces her into joining her club before she will then remove the octopus. And it gets very, very close to being a higher rating than what the show is before finally she signs and they remove the octopus. And then she shows her how to kill the octopus. She just kind of like peels back the skin and just like reveals the brain or whatever, the guts on the inside. And our MC faints, I think. Maybe she doesn't quite faint, but
She does.
yeah. So back at the school gets started, and she is trying to join the club she wants to, but she's already kind of committed to the other one. So she's just saying like, oh, maybe I'll go and tell them that I just don't want to do it. Sorry. But then she kind of gets guilted and or talked into staying at least one day. And then she is very awkward at first because everything is just kind of gross and she's not very outdoorsy. But then she starts to have fun and she kind of enjoys hanging out with everyone. So she asks if she can stay in the club longer. And everyone's excited to have a new member because that's how the club's going to survive. Otherwise, we might not have been able to make it with as few members as we had.
You mean a club show in which the club didn't have enough people, except they got the one person and they weren't going to join the club, but then they decided to join the club because they liked the people and had fun?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The show was surprisingly funny.
I liked it.
I'd agree with that, yeah.
It opens with what kind of roach did you say that was?
A wharf roach.
Wharf roach. I had no idea. I just wrote it down as a water bug. Crawls on her hand and she pulls her hand up and sees it and freaks out and it just goes, yo. and I fucking
Yeah.
that she was me, if I'm being honest. Like I am very startled by things crawling on me when I don't expect them to.
Same. This was cute and surprisingly kept my interest for these. Well, I mean, maybe not surprisingly, because I have a history of liking these. But all the ones we've seen recently, I haven't cared about. But this one actually held my interest pretty well.
Yeah, and I joked about
she's likable.
I joked about the coercion too, but then they even kind of like backtrack on that a little bit. Like the club president says, like, look, I'm sorry I forced you into joining, but you know, if you want to stick around and give it a shot, it might be a good experience. And then she asks at the end, it's like, was it a good experience? She's like, yeah, it was a good experience. So
Everyone
It just took a little bit of blackmail. That's all.
yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
You come for the blackmail, you stay for the friendship.
Everyone in this show is likable. I find that there's not a single character in this show who I am seeing and thinking like, oh my god, I hate this character. Which is generally there's at least one, but there's not one in this show. Everybody is likable and has a personality that's kind of, it's a little one note, but it's the first episode. They're setting things up. Everybody has a thing, a personality, and their own little quirks that would have them. It makes sense that people like this would be in the outdoorsy, like, you know, solitary activities club, basically. They're
Solitary Activities Club just seems like masturbation club. It's the only thing I could think of when you said that.
It's a real positive sesh.
Oh yeah. But everyone's likable. Nobody's annoying. They all kind of are. They obviously enjoy what they're doing. I enjoy fishing personally, so this is a show that I kind of liked. And it's weird if I've said before, if the characters aren't good, I'm not gonna like your club slice of life. And the characters here are really, really good, and I actually enjoyed the hell out of this. And I thought about watching more of it, but there was another show that I liked more that I watched more of instead.
There were actually a couple of these shows that I liked more.
I feel like the odd man out here. I mean, maybe the bar's just really low for you guys. I don't know, like what other enemies you guys have watched. I was bored out of my mind watching this. All the characters are like one dimensional. They're like, the main character in particular is just like, in general, I find the like pushover characters to be really irritating and like difficult to stomach, especially if they were the protagonist. Like, it's if you are going to be just like have no spine, which I feel like is also like a theme for this week based on like just the slew of episodes that we watched.
There are definitely a lot of those tropes in the show, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
I just found it really hard to get through. Oh, yeah. I mean,
it did feel a little bit slow. Like I would phrase it less as like slow in a bad way and more just kind of I've used deliberate before. I would say relaxed is kind of the tone of this show, which I think is kind of the point.
It is very relaxed. It's also one of those things is that you're absolutely right. The characters are in one note, and pushover characters are annoying. The thing is, that's every one of these club shows where somebody joins a club that they initially didn't want to has that trope. And that's one of those things that if you were to write off like club slice of life that have that trope, you'd be writing off 90% of club slice of life. It's just one of those things you kind of have to stomach until the story gets going. Which I'm willing to do again if I like the characters.
I didn't find it that egregious in this show.
It was less than others.
It was. It like takes her a minute, but she does at least work up the courage to say, I really don't want to do this. And in some shows, that's more than you ever get. And so
Actually,
I love how all of
it.
the way you guys are talking about this show I find so interesting, because it's not just this show on its own, it's this show in comparison to other shows that you have watched.
Absolutely.
Which is really interesting for me, because I the last slice of life club show I watched was for AniFiles, was like the baseball one. And so for me, I don't really have like a whole thing of like a whole like collection I can compare it to, and so I feel like I'm coming in like totally just like no I guess no expectations, and then you're right. It is a really slow moving show, and I feel like maybe if I was completely baked off my rocker, it would be like perfect for me.
Yeah.
It's really chill. It's really, really chill. It's if you're not in the mood for something chill, this wouldn't be interesting.
It's the sort of show that's definitely not going to grip most people, I think. And so, I mean, that's one of the reasons we like having guests, is because we get the sort of different perspective. And I like hearing, someone's thoughts of just like, I sat down to watch a show. Did the show interest me? And the answer in your case was obviously it did not. But maybe like different folks, different circumstances, like might be more, they might, even without context, find this more appealing if they just sort of like were endeared to the characters and thought it was kind of just a fun, relaxing sort of thing.
Part of it too is within that context is knowing what potential is there in some of these club slice of life shows, where you have some of them that are just the club slice of life straight ahead, and that's the show, and then it ends. You have others that have the potential of really being interesting and being just a fascinating exploration of these characters and their mentalities and who they are and what they enjoy and why they like it. If the show goes in that direction, which it seems like it could, because there's a lot of artistic presence in this show, it doesn't look like a clean digital anime. They tried to make it look hand drawn, and I doubt it is, but they tried to make it look like it. There's a lot of expression in this show that I think they could take it in that very interesting direction, which is part of the reason that I would give it the credit that I am giving it. If it came off like they weren't gonna do that, I wouldn't like it as much. But there's a lot of potential in these shows to be very, very good over time.
It's a really interesting criteria, though, to like sort of temper your watching. Like, you are actively influenced when watching this show based on like your predication for the future, and I think that's really interesting. I don't have that perspective, but there
was another thing that this caused me to think of, which is because the main character in this show I don't like, but A, she's not as egregious as most anime, and B, at least for me, there are always at least one, usually two characters in shows that I just can't stand.
I know exactly who you're gonna say.
And so there's other characters in the show that have to make it worthwhile, and for me, the president was just
She was spot on. She was cool. She was interesting. I actually didn't hate the character that you're talking, the friend from when she was a kid. Annoying, bubbly, always, excited about things. She wasn't, you're right, she wasn't as egregious as a lot of other shows. Other shows will have that character just run roughshod over the tone and over everything, and she didn't really do that. She was there and excited, but she wasn't the most annoying character in anime.
No.
So it's you're right. I did, when I saw her, I was like, oh no, oh god. And then they tempered her a little bit, which I thought was good.
I got such a kick out of her introduction, though, because as Chris mentioned, she runs into this person she knew, and there's this whole long conversation. She's like, you don't recognize me? And then there's like the picture of this friend, like as she is right then, and then just basically a carbon copy of her, and then slightly shorter, and she's like,
slightly darker skin.
Yeah,
I do recognize you. Come on,
that's racist.
The other thing that's about the show in a very positive way is the introducing someone to a hobby in a way that is neither like too intimidating. It was unintimidating, was welcoming, and also like they helped her learn. So like throughout the thing, they're kind of like they would do a few things for her, give her some tips, but then they would say like, hey, try it for yourself now. And so it kind of like forces her to like learn a little bit. And there's like a sense of you're accomplishing something, you're getting to experience it, but you're not also completely on your own and lost. It reminds me of recently some friends were introducing me to Magic the Gathering, specifically the Commander variant. And one of the things that they would talk about, you know, kind of after the fact, is how they really hate it when people just like go really hard on newbies early on, because it's like, if you just steamroll someone, they don't even know what just happened. Like, it's not going to be a very
They
attractive
didn't learn
experience.
anything.
But then, like, if you kind of ease them into it, and like, you know, not that you're like necessarily like going easy on them, you're just like not being an asshole, basically. Like, you're more likely to sort of get someone into the hobby, and that was something that they did really well in the show. Is like, I believed at the end that she had a good time and would want to keep doing it.
It reminded me of teaching my girlfriend how to shoot. In the space of an hour, I and a box of shells, I was able to teach my girlfriend how to handle and fire a shotgun and do so safely. And that was the kind of, like, it reminded, the methods that they used in teaching her fishing were the same methods that I was using in teaching shooting. Just like, let's get you introduced to it. I'll do a couple of the things for you, and then once you're used to actually firing it and turning the safety on afterward, then we can get into loading, racking, all the other things that you have to do, like the smaller aspects of it. And it's a really good curve for teaching someone how to do stuff. And they showed it in this show, like step by step. It was really interesting.
We are at the 5-minute warning, so should we move into ratings?
Yeah, let's move into ratings. Chris, what did you think about this show?
All right, Diary of Our Days at the Breakwater, episode 1, a good experience. Did the premise interest me? No, not really. I'm not really much of an outdoorsy person, in case that wasn't obvious. And so like the fishing as a hobby doesn't necessarily appeal, and it's just another kind of slice of life comedy. So not super interested in that. No. Did the production impress me? I think I'll say yeah. It was very clean. The backgrounds were really nice. The environments were really nice. The character designs were good. The animation was consistent. So I would say that, yeah, that gets a point. Did the storytelling impress me? I'm not going to give it impress, because like we talked about, it does have a lot of tropes. I think it does the tropes in a way that was more palatable than most shows, but it also didn't really stand out to me as something like really compelling, aside from what I mentioned with kind of like the way they eased her into the introduction. That's kind of cool. Did I enjoy the first episode? I'll give that a yeah. Did it make me interested to see more? Not really. I could maybe see myself seeing more if I want to just like kind of chill out with something, but there's a lot of other shows out there and I don't have a lot of time. So I believe that is a 3 overall for me. Or was it 2?
I only counted 2 for
It's
production
2,
and enjoy. Yeah, Dean?
That's correct.
Yeah, as far as scenario interest goes, it's a slice of life club show, and those never ever get a point in this category for me, ever. The production though was great. Like I said, they put work into making it look hand drawn, even though it was definitely digital. But it didn't look as clean and boring as a lot of digital anime looks. They also they just did a really good job introducing you to the world. The storytelling I thought was great. I didn't find it to be, it's the pace that I expected from the show. So that kind of relaxed pace made perfect sense in the context of the actual show itself. So I kind of enjoyed it. I did enjoy watching it. Am I interested to see more is an interesting question. I'm not going to watch any more of this, and I know that for a fact. Given unlimited time, I might though. Like, and I would though. Given unlimited time, I would. So I think I am interested to see more. I just probably won't.
Is that a 4 for you for a slice of life show?
It's rare, man, but this show, I really dug it. I don't know.
All right, then for me, Diary of Our Days at the Breakwater, episode 1. Chum, old buddy, old pal.
Oh shit! I didn't give my title. It was Big Titty Mute GF.
I had a feeling that was what you were gonna like.
Did the premise interest me? I'm gonna say no. I really find myself actually not caring about the kind of slice of life club anime as much recently. Even though
There's just kind of a lot of bad ones.
Yeah, and maybe that's all it is, but like, we watch all of them, and I really haven't cared about them recently, so I don't know, maybe my tastes are changing. So I'm gonna say no for that. Did the production impress me? Oh man, TG saying the bars on the floor has got me reevaluating this, because my gut instinct is to say yes, Because compared to all the other stuff we watch, especially stuff in this genre, yeah, it was real good. But did they do anything objectively impressive? I don't know. I am gonna give it a point, though, because from my perspective, it was impressive. The storytelling impressed me. I am gonna say, yeah, I'm gonna agree with Dean on this one. Basically for exactly his reasoning. Did I enjoy the first episode? Yeah, I really did. This was cute and laid back. But am I interested to see more? Even given unlimited time, I'm real on the fence, leaning no. Yeah, it was cute, but I don't know.
You can tell what it is. Like
you
even
can
just
tell what it is, and it was really only the one character that really grabbed me. The others were just fine. So I'm gonna say no. So only a 3 overall for me. Tzvi?
Diary of Our Days at the Breakwater, episode 1, Octopussy. The premise, does that interest me? No. I mean, I can see how it would be like interesting for like if you're into very slow moving sort of slice of life, whatever. All of, I guess, I mean, like you said, sort of all of these judgment categories are super subjective. So for me, the premise, yeah, I would say it doesn't super catch my interest. And for the production as well, like I feel like Dean makes a really interesting point that they try to make it look hand drawn. But when I'm watching it, like I sort of felt like the actual art style was like just didn't grab me. It felt flat. Lots of very slow moving eyeballs. I don't know if that stuck out to anyone else, but
Was this
sort
the
of like
show? No, it wasn't. There was one show where the eyeball stuck out to me, but it wasn't this one.
it's just yeah. It was like the art almost felt as slow as the actual premise. So that's also going to get a no for me. Storytelling, I don't. So this. Do you guys allow like half points? I feel like
You're not.
No.
No.
Yeah, that's fair. But this, like the story, like I feel like for the story they are trying to tell, they're very successful. But like I don't know where that leaves me as far as like giving it a point or not giving it a point.
I mean, it's subjective. If it didn't hook you, it's a no, and that's fine.
But
right?
I feel like then that makes it very similar to like, did the premise interest you? Like I feel like I'm just answering the same question twice in a row then.
That's kind of the issue with these club shows, is that the premise and the story are the same, basically. Like so you kind of have to look at the delivery of the premise when you're thinking about storytelling, and of course your subjective reaction to that delivery.
The other thing that the 2 questions kind of does for you is it's like I really wanted to like the premise, or I was really interested in it, but then like I was disappointed in the actual execution or something.
Right.
Oh, I see.
It
I
allows
see.
for that as well.
I mean, so I'm gonna give the storytelling a point because I think they do what they're trying to do. Even if I'm not interested in it, I still think they are capable of doing it. Did I enjoy it? Not. I didn't hate it. I mean, that's also like where does that leave me? Like I didn't dislike it.
Enjoyment is like you liked watching.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I have no interest in seeing more.
Yeah.
That's the wrong place to input that. That was the 1 for you, just for
that's a 1.
Yeah, so that brings our total score to a 10 or 50%.
That's probably right for it. As far as being like, it's a bit soft. It's not like an amazing. It's no Maidens in Your Savage Season. It's not
Maidens in
at
Your
that level.
Savage Season.
Oh, Maidens in Your Savage Season.
I know it's been like 3 seasons or whatever, but
the rules are the rules.
The rules are the rules.
The rules are the rules. You're right. I failed.
All right. The next show we have to talk about is Shachibato. President, it's time for battle. Boy, I am disappointed I can't introduce this one. So, Dean, just absolutely go at it for me.
Okay. We open up with some voiceover exposition. We got a goddess who's dropping gates on this world, a world which was called Gatepia beforehand. So talk about some nominative determinism. Inside inside the gates, the people find
I just did when they said that. Did it sound like Gaytopia to anyone else?
a little bit.
Okay.
Yep.
That was
like,
the thing.
did I hear that right?
Yep. Inside, the people find these crystals, and these crystals are used to make power, and the power allows them to develop not only electricity but also internal combustion. Despite the fact that these are two entirely different methods of power production, we have both now because of these magical crystals. Our main character's on the way to meet his friend, and the friend tells him, "Hey man, you got to be the president of this company." What's a company in this world? We don't know yet. She just says you got to be the president of the company. She takes him to the offices and tells him, your dad was the president, but he booked it to the big gate.
There's a lot of death symbolism around the way they talk about the dad, and I think
here's my issue with it. I think he did just leave. They call it the big gate, but I assume they have to call it that because Supergate is a registered trademark of the National Gate League. The company, it turns out, is in danger of bankruptcy, which means the thing that they need to solve their problems is a child president. That's how you solve that issue. They then sit him down in front of a video. This is a training video specifically for presidents of companies, which is nonsense. And basically, the training video shows you how to play a mobile game. So the rest of the party shows up, and she goes through and explains their classes like we don't know what classes are. There's a person there named Guide who's a kind of a cute girl who says, as long as there's money in it, I'm up for any job, which, got me excited. They go to clear a dungeon, and they actually show me a loading screen in this anime. They then, why don't you take the worst part of any video game and put it in your, they then meet some kid. The kid offers them a job. He wants a cliff flower, so they go to get the cliff flower. They fall down. Everyone survives miraculously because there are no stakes in this stupid fucking show. A monster shows up. They beat it with the power of shitty monster design. And then they celebrate. There's a half-assed attempt to introduce a mystery about one of the characters. And the show ends with a conversation between the MC and the friend on a rooftop, presumably right before they bang, but we don't get to see that bit.
I like how this falls into the category of mobile game adaptation. So far we have two categories of mobile game adaptations, Azure Lane and everything else. Azure Lane said, all right, so we've got this mobile game that has these characters, so we're going to take these characters, throw away the game, and write a story. Everything else says, so this is a show, which is not actually like a show. It's a bunch of animators playing a mobile game and explaining to you, the viewer, how to play a mobile game. So that's half my notes about this show.
Actually, I think last week the Isekai ripoff show or parody show was also, they had like a loading screen that was extremely reminiscent of Fate Grand Order, incidentally.
This made me so angry. As soon as they showed me a loading screen in an anime, I was like, oh no. This show is gonna get ripped to fucking shreds. I'm gonna kill it.
I like how in both the in the synopsis of the show, whenever Dean sort of gives the summary, we get both the summary and also how he feels about it, just like all in one nice package.
Yep.
Saves us time. It's convenient.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's very compact.
I try to do that with the garbage shows. I don't do it so much with the good ones.
This show also, so I have too many things I want to say and not enough brain space to separate them.
It's bad.
Okay, so I watched these shows out of order, and so this was the last one I watched. So I watched all the other shows, and I'm like, are we gonna have an episode
Just
where every show is good? And then I saw the title for this, and I said, oh no, we get at least one bad show. And boy, did this live down to my expectations. Alternatively, this show made me very aware of a thing in anime, which I'm now calling the boobs to waifu ratio. Which in a typical anime is gonna be about 2 to 1, 2 boobs for every waifu. In this show, it was at least undefined, because they're at least 5 boobs.
Yeah, it's weird.
But there are 0 waifus, and you can't divide by 0.
You're right. You're right. There are no waifus in this show.
The like single. boobs?
At least 5 single boobs. Those typically come in pairs, so probably 6. But
Okay, I was gonna say, it's like, did I miss something here?
the joke I was making was an odd number of things that come in pairs.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, C0 in chat even says can't divide me. He's tried, so
Yeah. Yeah, obviously. The thing that worries me, the thing that I hated the most is that this fucking show, it wants me to it's like it wants me to have fun, and don't tell me how to feel.
Luckily, the one other boy in this show, who has no personality except that his backpack is sentient. He's only 17, but he's a 4-star character, Pog.
Oh god damn it!
And our president, I must have missed something. Our president is a 2-star character.
Yeah, he's like that. And then like the entire time, like the one warrior character, the fighter character, I guess, was like constantly saying like to his face, like, he seems very unreliable. How do we end up with this piece of trash as our president? Like on and on and on. And like she's like, oh, of course he's a 2-star character. Right? It's just like.
Does this game talk to me this way? If I roll that soldier character in the game, is she gonna come out of the chest and go, "You seem unreliable"?
It just makes you determined to prove yourself, Dean. And then of course, like there's the whole running gag too of like the president saying it's like, I never really agreed to this. I want time to think about it, but then like everyone kind of like keeps moving forward because like they really want him and or need him to be the president. It's like they just kind of like, you know, act as if he is already accepted. And then of course at the end he's like, you know, and in the end no one cared what I had to say after they finished their mission. And
I like how they have that gag, and so towards the end, after they finish the dungeon, they try to play this gag off, and the way they tried to play it off is to like cut him off in the middle of his sentence as he's saying, "I
like
never
literally
agreed to
jump
this."
cut from
Except
that to
there's just half a second of black screen when they cut him off. It's not even like an abrupt transition to then do the joke.
Like they could have just like cut from like middle of a word to kanpai back at the office, right?
They could have cut to black and done the voiceover. They didn't care what I had to say on the black screen and then gone back to the. If you're gonna cut to black, they could have put that joke in there. But it just looked like a bad edit.
Yeah. Oh, any hot takes about the show, TG?
I was mostly just like, is this the entire? So I watched it without subtitles. I don't in like the link that was available in the doc. Like there was. So I spent most of the show just trying to figure out what the fuck was going on.
Were there no subtitles for this?
And so
did you watch it on Funimation or did you? Oh.
I mean, I checked to see there was.
Funimation actually turned off subtitles for me earlier when I pulled up a show to watch last night.
I mean, there were just no options. Like it said subtitles and then it was blank. Whereas all the other shows had.
That's so weird.
Had Japanese and
got
English.
Problems.
It was fine. I mean, I was mostly figured out was good. There was not much. There was like lots of boobs. Like most of the female characters looked exactly the same with just different hair color.
Yes.
So that was like. Yeah, I mean, no real hot takes. I was just like, oh, this is like a turn-based like tactics game, and those never interest me. So I was just like
a bad adaptation of one too.
Yeah,
because it was about playing the turn-based tactics game, not trying to make a story.
Don't watch this show. Just go play Fire Emblem. Like, jeez.
Don't play this game either. Play a good gacha game.
Like giving away a little bit of my score. Like I actually. Just based on the on paper short version of the pitch, you're a president running a guild basically, and you send people out and do missions. And then like they even defeated that premise, like which could have been was like already 50-50 for like this could be bad, but probably will be bad, or it could be good, will be bad. But then like they have the whole thing is like, as the president, you need to go with your party to basically direct their every move. And like, of course, they like he proves
It's
these
not even
by like observing that like the rabbit thing, the rabbit wolf that they were fighting is like, oh, his tail lets him detect movement behind him. So we just need to put goop on his tail so he can't sense anything, and then we can kill him. And it's like,
it's not even a proper party management game.
Yeah.
It's like or a show rather. It doesn't. It's so broken.
Oh, shall we get into ratings for this?
sounds good.
Dean.
Okay, so this thing is gonna get zeros across the fucking board. It didn't even look good. The monster design's bad. Like it's bad. Not only is it boring. Like, okay, we have a werewolf dude and a little slime, but we also have monster design that's terrible in that it's. So wait, you just throw goo at its. Who would know that? And why? And why would you even try it? That's nonsense. And
I bet that's not even a mechanic in the game.
God.
Right.
No, this show has brought out such anger.
I hate it. Okay, so it's bad. It doesn't look good either. It's a digital anime. It looks like every other digital anime. It's boring, and they have a training video that tells me how to play a mobile game. It gets zeros.
For me, Shachibato, President, it's time for battle. Episode 1. When the adults are away, the children will fuck. Because they tried to do a joke at the very beginning when childhood friend calls him out and he's like, she's gonna confess to me. And then we cut to her, except we just cut to a full screen shot of her boobs and her arms jiggling her boobs. And she's all shy and like, I don't know how to say this, but will you be the president of a corporation? Yeah, also zeros. Tzvi?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the extent of what I have to say about this was I've already. It's incredible how much of a show you sort of miss out on when you're trying to like just figure out what they're saying to each other. But it did give me the opportunity to sort of look at things I wouldn't normally pay attention to, and I don't. And like, so one of the things that also just stood out to me is like the efficacy of this as a pilot episode. I felt was pretty weak insofar as there were so many characters I felt like they were trying to introduce me to. It just felt like a clusterfuck, and there was like no opportunity to learn the backstory or anything about any of the characters because you were just like a dump truck just like dumped all of these people on you.
It's this boy, priest, this girl, soldier, this girl, Mac chick, this dude over here is a thing too, and we're going to the gate now.
Yeah. Zeros across the board for me. There was like no opportunity, I feel like, to get to understand anything about it.
And Chris.
All right, Shashibato, President's Time for Battle, Episode 1, Extremely Anti-Agile Management. The premise interests me. I'm actually going to give this a point because when I heard the idea, like I kind of enjoy the types of games where like you are the king or the sort of like manager of like, you know, kind of the twist on RPGs is the party management game. So like you send them out and they do a thing, they come back and you're just kind of managing the business, so to speak. And then even in the opening minutes when they're kind of introducing the setting and some of like the premise, they would show like the logos of all the different companies, and the logos actually like kind of evoked like modern day corporations. And so I was like, okay, I'm kind of liking where this is going. This is kind of a fun take on it. And then just immediately the rest is zeros. And so it's just a 1 overall for me.
That brings our total score for this show to a 1 or a 5%. The next show we have to talk about is Woodpecker Detective's Office. Earlier in the week, Chris said that this was surprisingly decent, surprisingly good. I forget your exact words, and
it was a pleasant surprise.
Pleasant surprise. I was like, man, I don't know about that. This show was a pleasant surprise.
It was.
All right, 3 minutes.
This is a show about a poet who gets blood on his shirt, so he decides, I'm going to be a detective instead. And so he walks into a brothel, and we find out he's a peeping Tom. and he watches a whole bunch of people fuck before being like, "Ah, yes, here's the murder that I knew happened because of blood. No other way that a guy could have blood on his hands that would then get onto my shirt and just murder."
Especially when leaving a brothel.
And then it turns out that the inspector detective guy who's like actually one of those isn't and is bad at his job, and so our poet has to be like, "Ah, yes, but you haven't actually looked at the crime scene, have you? Because there's no blood splatter here in the shape of a square. It must have been a letter." And then it was because plot. And then our poet boy is like, "So it's pretty clear that the guy who's being framed for this is being framed for this. So I'm gonna lie and falsify evidence because the inspector isn't." See my note 5 seconds ago. And there's some food, and actually this show, I'm being hard on it in my review, but actually it was pretty engaging and interesting. Too much stuff was delivered via exposition, like the delivery of the plot
a lot of it.
is entirely our poet boy going, "Oh, but this must be what happened," kind of Sherlock style, except that he has no reason for believing
It's very
anything.
Sherlock in its presentation. Like, you even had like the Holmes, Watson, Lestrade dynamic going on. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's this show. A guy, the murderer and the guy who's being framed are related in a way that I feel like the Crunchyroll synopsis for this show did a better job explaining than the show itself.
Yep.
I got from the show they were just like acquaintances from the same hometown.
The Verve synopsis says that like the guy who was murdered actually worked for this prime suspect. But there was something going on that like the suspect wanted to end that relationship or like fire the guy or something.
The guy wanted to leave the company. And
Oh, you're talking about the victim. Never mind.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
do I have it
victim wanted to
back? Do I have it
leave the
flipped?
company. Well, that's what that's the thing. It was difficult to follow. The victim wanted to leave the company, and so the suspect who was framed, the original story was that the suspect, the guy who was framed, his boss, had gotten in a fight with him when he was told he wants to leave the company and killed him, but it ended up being somebody else entirely.
Also,
Do we
there
ever
was
find out who the murderer is?
not in this
Not in the
episode.
first
No,
episode.
No,
it doesn't
right?
tell you.
No,
He's just like, it would be someone like me.
Oh yeah. Also, so they set this up at the beginning, and I completely forgot about it until the end. But this entire episode is a flashback to 10 odd years ago.
Yeah,
It's told from the perspective of the Watson character because the poet died and he's remembering their stories together.
I don't have a whole lot to say about this. Oh, I like the style of this show. It has that kind
It's
of
beautiful.
Otome look that we're always like, I want a good show with this look. Jury's out on whether or not I think this is a good show, but it did keep me interested, and it wasn't like a bad show, and it has this look.
Well, I have notes about the art style. I'm curious, what do you mean by Otome look? What is that another show?
No, so an Otome is a dating sim for female players, audience.
Yes.
It's a harem of attractive boys around you for reasons, and then you've got routes for each one. You can romance them and get their story and stuff. And so when those get adapted to anime, they just have a style, which is this. And it's typically like only Otome, which are done in that style. For
It's a
reasons I don't
strange.
understand.
It's strangely specific to this genre, but the way that the cherry blossoms are drawn and the way or painted, rather, these are painted mats. The way that the actual the sort of pretty boy lanky characters, but also like it's just the whole vibe is very much Otome.
Because I was gonna say for what stood out for me were the environments. They seemed like like 4K textures, but it was just like it felt very immersive.
The mats were really good. They were really,
lighting
really
was
good.
really good
As
too.
soon as I saw that cherry blossom mat at the beginning, I was like, "Oh, this is pretty. This is gonna be a pretty show." Also, the OP is not terrible.
I mean, what do you think about the premise that poets and detectives have so much in common?
God,
kind of-
just
it's a little bit corny, but also like I get it. They made a good argument for that, and that like you're looking for like little changes in people or the environment and stuff like that, and that kind of like drives the art. So I thought it was fun.
there is a lot of poetry that's based on exploding details. So like you take a detail of a thing and you explode that and in the poem, and it becomes like that's part of the reason that poetry tries to be or is so relatable to a lot of people is because you take details everybody's familiar with and explode them. So it makes sense, but it also just felt like an anime line.
Yeah.
Like it just
It was also the characters were kind of cool. I enjoyed their personalities and their conversations. Like you have the sort of lazy artiste in the poet character who just like, very go with the flow and like, oh, I can't pay rent, so I guess I'll just move, no big deal. But then our Watson character basically like sells his book collection to give him money to cover his rent, and then as soon as he gives him the money, he's like, well, you don't have this kind of money, and so like he deduces and he runs to his room and sees that he sold his collection of books. And so like rather than doing the whole like, oh, you shouldn't have done that, my pride sort of thing, he just like says like, I'm gonna like, even if it kills me, I'm gonna make sure nothing bad ever happens to you. Like it was just kind of like, it was a nice reaction, I thought.
That actually was like real sinister to me, again, because the show doesn't explain this, but the let me actually pull this up. The Crunchyroll summary does. The Crunchyroll summary is like where is it? Is it okay? So it's not for the show itself. Is it for episode 1? Enraptured by both drink and women, Takuboko finds himself perpetually out of money. And so I saw the Watson character sell his books, and like I have this idea planted in the back of my mind from the summary for this that like our detective character has just straight up lied about where the money went. That didn't sit right with me.
Well, I don't know, because I think the Watson character, and maybe this was just kind of benefit of hindsight, when he's talking about his character, he also said like, he was always out of money because of his vices. And so I kind of read it a little bit more as like just he knows what he's like, but he still wants to help.
Okay, I missed that line. So yeah, in that case,
I think it was at the VO in the beginning, right? When he said that.
But then even then, like, to your point, maybe it is that he doesn't quite know that just yet. And then maybe a plot beat later down the road is like, he's being generous, but then he starts feeling taken advantage of, and maybe that becomes a point of conflict.
That could be a a good conflict. I found it. I want to talk a little bit about the time period the show takes place in too. This takes place, I think they said, 40 years after Westernization, or after
it's
Japan
the Meiji era, I think.
So this would be 1920 or so. I'm trying to think.
That feels a little late.
Exactly. That is late. I can't remember. Let me pull up the actual year that Japan was forced to open. Oh my god. If you search Japan forced to open, all you get is porn.
Oh no.
Wow.
the only other
the first commercial treaty, Harris Treaty, 1858. So about 40 years on from 1860 or so. So 1900. Yeah,
that sounds about right. I was going to say like very early 1900s, very late 1800s.
Yeah. So yeah, I found the time period fascinating because you have suits and you have traditional Japanese outerwear. I've forgotten the word for clothing.
Dresses. The men were wearing dresses.
And then you also have like there's an interesting mix of technology and like the way that things just sort of work. It's a fascinating period in Japanese history, and the way that they presented it was really cool.
Unlike Appare Ranman, they actually did a good job of making it feel like a believable time. Probably because it was, and they weren't trying to do steampunk, but
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot else to say about this show. Does anyone have anything else they want to? All right.
I think we hit on most of it. Yeah.
Ratings for the show: Woodpecker Detective's Office, Episode 1, Hookers and Obstruction of Justice.
It's true.
Did the premise interest me? No, I really don't care about detective shows. And between this and the other Sherlock anime we got, I'm learning that I don't like the style of Sherlock.
There have been so fucking. This is the 4th one in just a few seasons.
Did the production impress me? I'm gonna say yes. It looked real pretty. Did the storytelling impress me? No. Actually, I think the way they delivered everything by having that one character exposit it is kind of lazy and uninteresting. Did I enjoy the first episode? I did, actually, overall. It was interesting. The delivery in terms of pacing, I thought was good. But am I interested to see more? No. So only a 2 for me. Tzvi?
So the premise I thought was cool. I generally like Sherlock shows, especially when they're not like technical detectives. So I thought the premise sounded very interesting. And then the actual production, I guess, gave me very high hopes because, like I mentioned earlier, the quality of the setting and sort of how immersive it was felt like they did a very good job getting you to that place at that time with those people. That said, the storytelling did fall flat for me. The poet character himself was like really not interesting. I feel like a big draw for those types of Sherlock shows are not only the mysteries but also the personality of the detective himself. And the poet, besides like forging evidence because of a hunch, like besides the fact that like super unethical, it was also the extent to which the mystery was non-existent and like the ability for him to discover clues was sort of vapid. I found really disappointing. A huge pleasure I get out of those types of shows are like, oh, like all the stuff that you would have noticed as a viewer actually like were clues, and like here's how they all tied together, whereas this was just him again, like just talking through. And speaking of his talking, it was very slow. It was really drawn out to the point where even the characters comment on it. Like the inspector is just like, can you please like hurry up?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, but that activates my trap card. I have a military personnel here, and so I get to talk longer, and you have to salute. So I found that really, I would give the storytelling negative if I could. And I did. So as a result of that, I didn't end up enjoying it, and I would not be interested in seeing more.
Is that a 2 overall for you as well, then?
That's 2. That's 2, yeah.
Chris?
All right, Woodpecker Detective's Office, Episode 1, So Call Me Meiji. Did the premise interest me? That's a weird one for me. I think I liked... I'm going to lean toward a yes on this one. It's a little up in the air because, like you said, it's kind of like an otome detective thing, which is iffy. But then also I was kind of intrigued by the idea of like the poet turned a detective and the time period and all that different stuff. So I'll lean yes on that one. Yes, the production did impress me. Very interesting stylization overall. Like we mentioned, like the backgrounds were really cool. The character designs were cool. The sense of space and the lighting and the ambiance was all really good, I thought. Did the storytelling impress me? Not really. I think for a lot of the reasons you guys pointed out, like I did enjoy it, so I'm going to give it a point there, but it did feel a little bit plotting and a little bit here and there. Like for the most part, I felt like even some of the kind of arbitrary things that he knows or guesses, I think I got the sense that the show was aware, and the characters, or at least they, the two of them were aware that these were just hunches and guesses, and he's acting on basically trying to affect the impression of the inspector and not like trying to actually solve the case at this point. But overall, I would say they had enough kind of issues that it wasn't impressive per se. I did enjoy it. It did make me interested to see more. Another one that's tricky for me, I think it was solid. And like I said, it was a pleasant surprise, but it's just not likely to keep me going, I think, just based on the first episode alone. So that is a 3 overall for me.
And Dean.
Yeah, as far as scenario just goes, I'm gonna give it a point. I like detective stories. I like Sherlock stories, much like Tzvi said. The production, I thought it was beautiful. It looks great. It's the VO was good. I have no complaints about the production, and it looked beautiful. So it gets a point there. Where the storytelling is concerned, I think Tzvi made the perfect point about this, and that is that the show doesn't understand that detective stories need a cathartic moment where everything kind of comes together. And that's what makes them interesting. That's what makes them fun. That's the moment that you look at imbibe of mystery media for, whether it's, the novels or games or whatever it is that you're doing. If it's a mystery, there has to be a moment of catharsis. Everything comes together and it all just kind of falls into place. And the best written stories do that. This show seems to not understand that you need that. And the invention of a clue because you have a hunch is antithetical to, unless this is supposed to be a show about a shitty detective, which I don't think it is, it's antithetical to what you're supposed to be doing in a mystery, in a detective story. So I was very bothered by that. It's a beautiful show. It's an interesting setting. It's all these great things, but they're missing what makes mystery shit good. And I that's just egregious to me. Like, I don't want to watch your mystery show if you don't know how to write a mystery. I'm sorry. I don't. And so I think that's the biggest knock against this thing. It's why it doesn't get a point for storytelling. It'll get a point for enjoyment just because that happens so late in the show, but I'm not interested to see any more of this. It's not. If this is how they're gonna tell mystery stories, I want no part of it. It just wasn't good.
That was certainly a. Sorry, go ahead.
Was that a 2 or 3 for you?
That was a 3.
All right.
Which I think is high, but I didn't not enjoy it up to that point. Like, I thought it was actually really fun up to that point.
You make an interesting point about kind of like what's expected of detective shows, and it's certainly a risk because what they clearly did is they sort of subverted that expectation. Like, they have kind of the payoff moment, but then we learned that, like, oh, actually that was just planted evidence. And so I thought it was an interesting twist on the formula. But if you're expecting like to solve the mystery in the first episode, and even just the fact they didn't have like a fully like self-contained story in one episode is another interesting choice for.
Well, you could have a small one where they figure out he's being framed. If you want to tell it over multiple episodes, you can have a smaller one of those moments where they figure out he's being framed, and that's where your episode ends. And then in the next episode, you solve the rest of it. But I can see, I totally understand that idea that it's subversive and these other things. My problem with that would be, it would be like subverting a space opera by not having space in it. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I'm curious, like, Chris, did you find that twist enjoyable? Like, were you like, oh, my expectations were subverted and I am like pleasantly surprised?
I wasn't thinking about it in those terms actually at the time. That's more a thought that came up hearing Dean talk about it just now.
I think subversion can be very well done, but it has to have its own payoff. If the payoff is like, oh, I knew the letter was in the bin because I put it there, does that do it for you?
Not that necessarily. What did kind of get me interested was how he played the inspector. And then kind of like the moral grayness of that, I thought was interesting. It's like, oh, this is like a scoundrel detective sort of thing, and not just a straight ahead like I am the brilliant detective sort of thing. So like kind of the morally gray, unethical act of doing that, but then kind of like the psychology of how he leads up to that being the obvious conclusion, very Sherlock style, but then it's actually just a plant. I thought was interesting. That was kind of what I found cool about it.
Well, that brings our total score for this show to a 10 or 50%. I know we have kind of a time constraint for this, and we started late because I overslept again. Do we need to like skip break and kind of rush through this, or?
I'm good either way.
Yeah, I'm good to skip a break. We have an hour, or a
Okay.
little less than an hour.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you needed to go in the next 20 minutes or not. But I also am good to skip the break unless someone needs a break.
No,
I wouldn't mind more coffee, but I'm good.
I just sit here during the breaks anyway, so I'm good.
If you want to run and grab a coffee, Chris, I won't take us to break screen. I'll just vamp for a few minutes.
All right, cool. BRB.
I was saying that I have no idea what I'm going to vamp about.
I fell down a 40k lore hole.
Yeah?
So I've been watching 40k lore videos for like the past week. Like falling asleep to 40k lore videos. Because God, is that an expansive universe.
I was about to ask, like, I assume since you've fallen down the hole that it's interesting lore.
Oh God, yes. It's so the 40k it's incredibly expansive, and it really shows its age in like the grimdark aspects of it from back when that was cool and not just edgelord shit, like because it all still exists in it, and it's a little bit nostalgic in that way.
Nice.
But there are no good guys. Like there's the Empire of Man, which you kind of have to be aligned with, at least mentally, in some, depending on what your favorite factions are, but you have to kind of be aligned with it. But it's basically just a totalitarian fascist empire, fascist empire. So it's like I don't want to root for these assholes, even though the fucking Astartes are the coolest, some of the coolest soldiers in any fictional media. I still don't want to be part of this. It's fascinating lore. I got like completely caught up on Bife videos about Destiny 2, and I was like, I need more expansive sci-fi lore just to be interesting. I need something interesting. And so I found a guy who makes very similarly to Bife. He makes Warhammer lore videos that are just amazing, and I can't remember his name. But
That's so 40K is like mostly a figures tabletop game, right? But then
Yes.
it also has the video game, or like a couple video games.
Several video games. They were on a licensing tear a few years for a few years there, where they released just Warhammer game after Warhammer game after Warhammer game. A lot of them taking place in the mainline Warhammer universe. Some of them taking place in a parallel universe called the Fantasy Universe. That's more of like a D&D style thing, but with Warhammer. It's a, and by D&D I mean like swords and sorcery type stuff. Not the play style.
All I know
But
about it
there's
is
a-
that when my friends got into it, they described it as a very expensive hobby.
It is a very expensive hobby if you're going to do the figures and stuff like that. But there's like 900 books. Like the novels in the Warhammer novels are very similar to like what the Star Wars expanded universe used to be. What's now Legends, where it's just like book after book after book after book after book, compressing time and you know, just it's very much like that in Warhammer. The guy's Luetin 09, Luton 09.
Okay.
On YouTube if you want to get into some 40k lore like I have.
Hey Ned, sorry I missed your message earlier. I had the Google Doc tab open instead of the Twitch tab because I'm bad. All right. The next show we have to talk about is listeners. Chris, will you synopsize this for us, please?
Listeners. Yes, I will. So this is the show that was sort of pitched as the musical Mecca show. We have a world that apparently has fallen into some sort of calamity, specifically the region that our MC lives in. I don't know if it's supposed to be Japan necessarily. It's just, I think it's kind of undefined.
The name of it sounded very British.
Actually, it did, now that you mention it.
Yeah, and they also said that it used to be considered the center of the world, which definitely makes me think England.
The Grand Meridian.
Britain.
Yeah. It's a fair point. All right, well, so they're somewhere in England, I guess. And our MC is, he makes a living by being a junk collector. Basically, there's just mounds and mounds of trash that's kind of like considered the trash heap of the world. I guess like just that's the place where everyone dumps their trash now. And so this whole town, basically their lifestyle revolves around work. To live is to work. If you're not working, then you're useless.
They might say work sets you free.
Yeah, they might. Except
they might say something along those lines.
But they also like don't make any qualms about the fact that this is just your lot in life.
Yeah.
So, and they apparently are a little bit puritanical in the sense that the mayor and therefore kind of like the power structure of the town don't seem to like music or culture. They seem to be relatively just kind of focused on work basically and survival.
Get paid, go spend your check at the bar, go to work again.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the cycle.
Yep. And while you're at the bar, don't watch any boxing matches.
Yeah, you're not allowed to watch. You're not allowed to watch the Real Steel film starring Hugh Jackman.
But our MC is kind of content with his lot in life. He enjoys collecting junk, and he sort of like thinks a little bit about visiting far off places, and he's kind of fascinated by it, but he's just like more excited. It's like, look at all the cool stuff from the faraway places that ends up here. I think this is really fun and great. And we're not sure if it's just self-delusion. It's implied that it might be. And while he's going through the junk, he discovers a girl who has been kind of tossed in there, and she has an audio jack somewhere in kind of like her like tailbone kind of area, like the base of the spine. And he points out to his sister when she takes her home to like, you know, try to nurse her back to health. They're like, hey, look, there's a hole down here. And that's of course right when she wakes up and, you know, punches him in the face, you know, because typical anime fare. Turns out that she is, what do they call them? A player, yeah. They play equipment, and equipment is basically, in this particular case, our MC has been building one for a few years. It is a guitar amp that transforms into a giant mecha. And the players, I guess, control these mecha to fight the earless, which are these kind of almost bat-looking shadow creatures, I guess.
They definitely have ears.
They definitely have ears.
Yeah, they got these giant fucking ears on them, like bat ears.
And so our MC, there's like a little confrontation where the mayor comes in and is kind of saying like, oh, you players do nothing but bring calamity. You know, you need to get out of this town at once. And she's like, fuck you, man. And our MC stands up to the mayor for her. And that's kind of a big moment, apparently. And then they're talking back and forth. But I was like, don't you want to like, you know, leave this place and live your own life? He's like, nah, I'm good. And she's like, well, that's not very punk rock of you. And so she is the earless attack, and so our MC chases her down when she's like getting ready to leave the town, and he's like, hey, use my equipment to fight the earless, and she's like, hey, cool. And so they give a great performance, I think they even call it, and they fight off the earless, and there's lots of effects and explosions, and then they hop on a train heading out of town as our mayor kind of the big symbol of their town that's like their faith, their god or whatever. It looks like, I was wondering if it's an actual musical like note or something like that. It's just the cutout and like you would have in a guitar. It's just like an F hole, basically. And so I think it's supposed to harken back to specifically like electric guitars of a certain era, because at 1.2 the mayor like says the name of some player who I guess used to be in the town that's not there anymore.
Jimmy Stonefree.
Yeah,
Jimmy
that's what it was.
Stonefree. Yes.
I don't know why I did that in an announcer voice, but I did.
Well, because he kind of said it in a very sort of like meaningful way there, and then of course in the ED we see a very Prince looking person and some other people I think are supposed to harken back to real life people, and so I'm not sure if they're actually making like references to actual like rock stars
They
throughout
are
history. Or
the cover of the players, who's who in players. If you look at the people in those covers, they're based on like rock stars.
but based on not actually them. It's not like a fate where
No, it's not.
we're like
I don't think
we're,
they
we're
could
bringing
get.
back historical rock
They
stars.
couldn't get the same licensing stuff that Carol and Tuesday was able to get. So all of the stuff is references. They're not actually playing songs and using the record labels and things, or the labels that are on the physical records. They're not able to use all that. They didn't get the licensing. It appears, but it's supposed to be like Carol and Tuesday, where these are real. It's references to these real rock stars.
There was one thing that stood out to me about this that I really appreciated. When our main character finds the girl in the trash, as something catches his eye, and so he walks over to it, and someone else sees him and kind of watches him from the top of the hill, and then they pay that off later, where it's the guy walks in with the mayor and entitled RMC was like, "I saw you with the player." Because there's kind of a break there, and I was like, they definitely drew a guy in the background. Are they going to pay this off? And they did.
Nice.
Yep, they did. This show. God damn! My only note for the show is fucking cool. Like, because I thought this was really cool.
I was very let down by this, if I'm being honest.
Really? You expected more?
I went into this with the premise of like Mappa does a music themed mecha show, and so I was very down for this, and then like it was actually pretty solid up until they got to the point where the mechas came out, and then suddenly it just went for me. Like it crashed so hard in my mind. I really did not enjoy it after a certain point. I appreciate a lot about it.
I thought it got cooler at that.
Like the direction was really cool. Like I really liked kind of the rock and roll sort of aesthetic and that sort of thing. That was really neat. And I was really digging the premise until the moment the mech came out, and then I was just like, oh no, like it just, I don't know. Maybe it was just me, but
overall, I'm with Dean. I really like this and really enjoyed this. But my notes are kind of hit and miss, actually. For one, our MC is kind of obnoxious. And then we get some nice VO about how this world is different from our world. Which I guess kind of makes sense because there was some cataclysmic event which changed things, so they would have a reference for normal, I guess. But it still just seems like a real clunky way to introduce that. And then they tried to be subtle about it. They tried real hard, and they still failed. And there are just random times where this switches to CG, and it's noticeable.
Yeah,
it is noticeable.
Yep.
They tried.
It's not bad CG, even. It's just noticeably different.
Yeah. I really like the idea of the equipment. Like there's something really cool to me about this dude carrying around this tube amp because the tube amp turns into a fucking mech.
Yep.
Like I thought that was absolutely badass. Like there's so much of this that I really, really love. Those little moments where like it goes CG and it's like, okay, you're CG now. I see that. The little moments where there are things that I'm like, on are completely, I think, overtaken by the idea that like this is super cool and this is gonna. It seems based on like the ED and the characters we see that this is gonna get cooler. I do wish they had a cooler
designs in the ending sequence were so cool.
Oh yeah,
the like gave me like just a little hint of hope for what's to come. Like if they didn't have that, I think I would have been a lot more down on the show than I already am.
I do wish that their enemies were a little cooler.
Yeah, the enemy design is real bad because it's just like black, like, well, Chris explained it. It's like black shadow, vaguely bat shaped, whatever. It's like you couldn't come up with like an actual monster design for this.
Like
All right.
that versus like the angels in Evangelion. It's like, why don't you try it harder?
I mean, it could have even been like a more symbolic kind of like the Earth fighting back against you sort of deal. Like maybe they are like they're trash monsters or something like that. I don't know. But it was just shadows, which I mean, there's, to be fair, there is the whole thing of like, this is a threat that we had no way to address before, but now we do it with the power of mech music, right? So like it's in a way a bit of a justification for that. But
I like the idea that like sound waves disrupt the enemies, and so like in episode 6 we get the bass cannon.
Oh God!
Drop the
I
bass.
want it. Give it to me. It makes sense because the earless and being like designed like bats and stuff. It would make sense that they would be disrupted by noise. My problem is that the name doesn't make any sense either.
Yeah.
Like
I think they were. It was almost like just the Heartless from Kingdom Hearts, except they replaced heart with ear.
Yeah.
right.
Like enemies who don't like music.
They've like you've lost sight of like, you know, kind of the music in your soul, right? And so yeah,
It's the line from Hallelujah, but you don't really care for music, do you? Which is a gutting line in like the context of the song.
Any thoughts about this, Tzvi?
I do, but I feel like all of my thoughts will fit into the sort of like summary for template, so I sort of will just end up repeating myself. I feel like if I just as far as like enemy design goes, though, I feel like I lack context as to the decisions like behind it. It sounds like if you know in episode 6 there's like a base cannon, maybe
no,
you've,
that
like,
was I
seen
was
more,
making a
but...
joke. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
It would fit
I was just like,
perfectly
you know,
in the, show,
actual
though.
design of the shadow monsters with giant hands, like that might just be like explained with understanding like more about this world. So like it's like that sort of didn't stick out to me as a sticking point for a first episode. I was
That
mostly
makes sense.
just like disappointed in the like storytelling and characters, but that's, I mean, I can talk about that now, or I could talk about that when we rate it.
I think it's a good time for ratings.
Yeah, we can go ahead and get into ratings. Chris.
All right, listeners, episode 1. They who have earless, let them hear less.
Oh God! God damn it!
Because there's like religious symbology and stuff too. So did the premise interest me? Yes, like I said, as soon as I heard the pitch, like we all had the same reaction. We were doing our bracket drawing. It's like, hell yeah, dude, let's do this. And then they carried that through. Like I said, I really enjoyed like a lot of the sort of theming and direction and stuff like that. Did the production impress me? It was very good for a lot of it, but I think there was also enough about it that felt kind of jank, that I'm not going to say impressed. It was really good, just not impressive. I did though enjoy some of like the shots of like the mountains of trash in the sunset and stuff like that. That was kind of nice. The storytelling impressed me. I'm going to have to say no here. Because while they did a solid job and the characters, you know, like felt believable, and there was like a little bit of nuance there as far as like, you know, the characters like a little bit self-deceptive and stuff like that. Like, it wasn't groundbreaking, but it was solidly done. It just wasn't enough to impress. Did I enjoy the first episode? I'm gonna have to say no, honestly, and maybe that's just because I had such high expectations that got let down. Especially when the mech came out, I was kind of hoping that they would do some like really cool creative stuff with like, we do see very clearly it's the sound waves, or somehow like you play it in a way that feels like very musical, but it was really just like it's a vaguely rock and roll themed mech that you ride and just sort of does generic mech things against generic shadow enemies. And so that was a bit of a letdown. And so for that reason, it make me interested to see more. Not really. I think I'm going to have to be given a very enthusiastic review by someone who's seen more of it before I'm inclined to watch more. So I think with that is a 1 overall for me.
Dean?
Scenario interest. Yeah, when we heard this synopsis during the drawings, everybody was like, "Oh, yeah, we're in for this." So I'm gonna give it a point there. As far as production goes, I I liked the character designs in this. I thought it was vaguely futuristic without being too nice. Which I kind of enjoyed. I also like the style here. Chunky clothes on skinny bodies is just a style I like. So I thought it was pretty cool as far as that's concerned. The the actual mech design, these mechs are small. And it looks like they're all kind of like that. So while I tend to prefer bigger, more intricate, Gundams and stuff like that. This is fine. This is fine. I'll give it a point for production despite the CG. As far as the storytelling goes, I'll give it a point. I liked it. It was engaging. I like the characters pretty well. Echo's a bit annoying sometimes, but generally they're pretty cool. Did I enjoy it? I did enjoy watching it. I wanted to say I could have done with, kind of to Chris's point, I could have done with a bit more Fooly Cooly, where it's a little more musical.
Yep.
Where there's where maybe it makes, I mean, in Fooly Cooly, when she hits somebody with the guitar, you actually hear like she hit somebody with a guitar. I could have done with more of that here. The whole thing's supposed to be music based, and I don't know. I could have done with more of that. That said, I don't know. I still enjoyed it, and I do want to see more of this. This gets a 5 from me.
Did you have a title for this?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Then for me, listeners, episode 1, Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution. Did the premise interest me? Yep. Did the production impress me? I am going to give this a point. I tend to fall more with Dean. Like, Chris is right. There was some jank. Overall, I felt the production was pretty good, though. Did the storytelling impress me? I am going to give it a point. Again, just fall a little bit closer to Dean's take. Did I enjoy the first episode? Yes, I did. And am I interested to see more? Yeah, I am. Yeah, okay. So a 5 for, there was something else I wanted to say, but then it wasn't important and I couldn't work it in. Tzvi.
Listeners, episode 1. That's not an audio jack.
To be honest, I was kind of excited to hear what you might say about some of that.
The premise definitely interested me. I'm not a huge fan of mech shows. Maybe it's just because I've never seen one that was done well, but I was a little hesitant with just the synopsis I saw about this show. But I thought the world looked interesting. So the premise definitely gets a 1 for me. And I like the production. I don't have any biases against CGI. I'm whatever. So I actually really like the environments. In particular, the sort of diner. There's a few outside shots of the diner, and I thought those were just really nice. I'm sort of I guess I'm sort of enamored with that sort of not steampunk, but run down,
it's a kind of a world made of trash, sort of this has been thrown together from pallets and ribbed aluminum or tin from the trash pile.
Yeah, that's sort of an aesthetic I just think is kind of cool. And then that's sort of where it ended for me. The storytelling I found really disappointing, and this is I guess what weighs the most for me in drawing my interest in a show. The main character, we just get a really long monologue from this main character about how he feels about life and how he feels about the trash heap, and he could just keep doing this forever. And I'm just show me, don't tell me. If you really like this life and this is the character that you're trying to build for me, then convey that in the joy he gets by digging, and don't just shove it down my throat of all this back information that I need to have and all of this understanding about how he feels. So that was right in the beginning of the show, and that was a big turnoff for me. And then just the like loud, obnoxious girl who has lost her memory but somehow still remembers how to activate a mech and also save him from falling, and then he names her after a Pokemon. Like that whole thing, I was just sort of like, there's not a single character in the show that I actually like. The mayor, like, as weird as this sounds, that guy comes in and he's like, they destroyed everything we have, please leave. They just bring destruction with them, and like however many years ago we had to put this all together, like you're not understanding. And the protagonist is like, no, like fuck you, like she doesn't even remember her name,
She's kawaii.
like it was just super. Like the mayor was the only character I thought who actually like had nuance and empathy. So yeah, so the storytelling at that point sort of just fell off for me, and I lost interest in the rest of the world. So I did not enjoy the episode and would not be interested in seeing more. So that's a 2.
That's fair. That brings our total score to a 13, or 65%. Last show we have to talk about Dean, baby. Will you sing Yesterday for me?
Oh yeah. Okay, so the show, we open up on a dude. He's waking up for work, and he's waking up for work. It's either before sunrise or after sunset. I'm not sure if he's working a graveyard shift. It's unclear. He meets a chick, who, and he's outside of his work. He's eating lunch. And he's feeding crows. He meets this chick who has a crow with her, and he gives her a reject bento from the quick stop that he's working at. He's talking about how he's, the voiceover is like, hey man, I have failed at life. I'm working at a thing, even though I graduated college, blah, 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 blah. He goes back to his house. His buddy comes over and tries to convince him to go to the reunion for their college class. He's embarrassed to, because again, works at a quick stop. He goes, back to work. The same chick shows up from earlier with the crow, talks to her a little bit, and then this chick shows up who I assumed was his ex-girlfriend, but she was not. They were just friends in college, and he liked her, but he never asked her out. They go to a restaurant together. He gets all pissy about his life. Then he's headed home. He sees the chick with the crow in the park. She tells him they've met before. And then the next day, back at work, she goes to the store again. She goes to the store again. He's gone, so she tracks him down. He's walking with the friend from college, and the chick comes up and starts fucking with him, and acting like, hey, are you cheating on me, blah, 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 even though they're not like together. The other woman, the friend, recognizes her. The chick runs off. The other woman's like, hey, that was an old student of mine. She got kicked out of school when people realized that she was working part-time at a bar. And then she just never went back to school because she was suspended. Because she taught at the school that was there.
So many people where I went to school would not have an education if they were kicked out for working part-time at a bar. Like.
Yeah, it's a weird standard. There's one of the things that we'll talk about in a minute. So he goes back to work. He talks to his coworker. The coworker's like, hey man, take a photo for my band's album cover. Everybody here's an amateur. Who gives a shit? Just take a cool picture. Here's the tape. He said we're releasing a CD, but it gives him a tape, which is strange.
Yeah. I wonder if that was a mistranslation.
He says CD.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
It could be kind of like maybe the way they would say, like we say album.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Because it's not really albums anymore, but that's still the term for that length and that format. So
he gives him the tape. He's listening to it. He convinces himself to go confess to his friend. He goes to her place and she's like, can't we just stay friends? And he's like, that's fine. I just wanted closure. And I'm like, closure's a fucking illusion, you idiot. There's no such thing as closure ever in this life.
I feel like I was just saving face. Like that's the way
right.
You awkwardly conclude that thought.
Exactly. So he's riding back. He crashes his bike. He lays in the trash and says, this is fine, which I took a picture of. That's a reaction image I'm going to use at some point. He talks to the chick with the crow again and then takes her picture for the album cover because she's kind of a cool, goth GF. And that's the end of the episode.
I really liked this show. Like, a
God, it's
lot.
so good. I watched all of it.
I was
Oh.
I was going to, but then couldn't for reasons. So I'll probably catch up on it today.
I watched
all
every
the-
bit of this.
I like all the characters in this. I really like. This was so fucking cathartic for me. The friend comes over and is like, the whole crew's gonna be there. I don't care about your self-pity. You better show up at the fucking reunion. And then the guy doesn't go.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. That's the correct response when you don't want to do a thing and your friends are like, I'm gonna tell you to do a thing. And you're like, nope, I'm not doing it because I don't want to.
Yep.
It's interesting. One of the tags they had on Crunchyroll for the show was seinen, which is of course the older audience, more mature version of shonen. So targeting primarily like young adults, adult men. And it's funny. I think like someone put it one way. I forget when and how, but it was like the difference between a shonen and a seinen is disillusionment.
Yeah, actually,
like,
that really tracks.
It's like, oh, hey, like this is the perspective of someone who's now out of college and in the real world, and oh boy, this sucks.
That's a perfect quote. That is perfect.
I think it might have been somebody talking about Fate actually, because like Fate has like Stay Night in particular has a lot of very like kind of shonen elements, but especially when you got into like kind of the second and third thirds of that story, it really starts addressing the idea of disillusionment and stuff like that. And kind of like questioning the weird ideals you come up with as a young person. And how that is confronted with reality. So that's why people call Fate a seinen rather than a shonen generally.
I wanted to address too. Tzvi said something about the chick getting kicked out of school for working at the bar. There's a weird thing in and it shows up in anime. I'm not sure about its place in Japanese culture, where it belongs, but there is a trope at least where there's strict moral enforcement by the school.
Yes, that is
so
true.
The school will demand, like, if the school sees you hanging out too late at night or hanging out in a seedy part of town or whatever, you might be punished by the school for moral infractions. That's part of Oh Maidens in Your Savage Season. Part of that show.
Maidens in Your Savage Season.
Well, and also high schools are elective, and so I imagine it's a little bit like kind of like religious colleges who have like kind of behavioral standards. Like if you get caught doing something that's against the code of conduct, then they have the right to suspend or kick you out or whatever. So
in the show whose name we say in a flowery way, there are characters who get in trouble for hanging out in the red light district too late. And they get in trouble from the school. There's that's a thing that exists. Again, I'm not sure in real life where it is in Japanese culture, but it certainly exists in anime.
Well, it's true. I don't know of any real life examples of that specifically, but I do know like there are some schools which require you to wear your school uniform even on your free time because you are an ambassador for the school and you are expected to be out in society representing the school in a positive way, which is just the most dystopian thing I can possibly think of. But yeah, the education in Japan, there's a lot of dystopian aspects.
I guess unless the role of the university or the college is to sort of transform you from whatever your adolescence
that's the thing is it's the high school.
Yeah, it's high school.
Like these are younger than college age kids.
But don't schools end up like, I mean, Ryan was telling me this in different contexts, but don't schools have play a larger role in the sort of the education and the growing up of kids over there than it does over here?
Yes.
Yes.
So I mean, if you want to wear a badge that's like, this is how kids from that school turn out, it makes a lot of sense, especially for parents trying to decide where to send their kids. I hate being the sort of the naysayer in this episode, but I really wanted to like this show, and I in watching it, I was able to recognize that like middle school emo me would have 100% love this show. Like relationships are an illusion.
Yeah,
like that
there's,
totally like I would have
absolutely.
I would have drank the Kool-Aid like so hard for this show. But sort of now, as ironically as an adult, I'm like so exhausted of the typical depressed male media. It like so doesn't interest me, and it's a cliche that I find very difficult to like keep running into and find meaning in if it's just a lot of tropes. And then that coupled with the manic pixie dream girl are two tropes that when put together are like I just throw in the towel and I'm like, all right, next. So
that's fair.
This guy being self-deprecating and being like, I'm a loser and like I do this and like I work at a shit store and my life is shit and like I went to college and now there's this like quirky young girl who's like she has like a crow and that's kind of weird, but they're also kind of cute. Like just like shut the fuck up.
She's got a crush on me.
Like I just
God damn it.
Yeah.
That's the episode title.
Everything you're everything you're saying is absolutely accurate. This definitely seems like a show that old Zoomers would identify with. Like the earliest of Zoomers who are like coming out of college now would definitely identify with this. It certainly spoke to 21-year-old me. That's
I think
a
that's
decade ago at this point, but it's still
part of what's interesting
there.
about it to me actually is the fact that like he's kind of going through this, and I think that being older than that now, I can kind of relate to it in it sort of recognizing my older sort of self in a way. Like I wasn't not it's obviously not one-to-one parallel, but like there was a time in my life when I could more relate to that. And then also though, like we start to even see in episode 1 a little bit of character growth of like, he's like he does the very sort of like dumb tropey, I need to just like confess to her and see how things go, and then it's like, oh, actually the real world is the real world. And like I'm think that probably a big part of the show is going to be him maturing, at least I hope so, and kind of growing out of these sort of like childish notions,
as they say.
That was the thing that I really appreciated about this first episode, at least, is that he's like talking himself up to this, like I have to, or maybe this was after the fact, I don't remember, but he's like, I have to stop lying to myself and like be honest to my feelings, or what's the Disney, I have to be true to myself. And confesses, and he's like, but then looking back on it, he's like, well, I did it to give myself closure, but there's no closure here. It's like, yeah, there's not. And I'm glad to see
closure doesn't exist.
I'm glad to see
because
you
hoping
learn
for
that,
closure is naive.
Like, we grew up with Disney, and even now, so much anime we watch is like, you're not a real man if you can't confess to the girl. And it's like, but if you know that she's gonna say no and it's not gonna work out, what do you gain?
Just don't do it. Just don't do it and quit hanging out with her.
Like you don't have, it's not necessarily even lying to yourself. I mean, I guess I can see a class of people who's not me, who's like, you'll never know if you don't ask, and that's true. But like typically people have a pretty good
intuit whether it's gonna
on,
go well.
Yeah. So like I don't know. So that was just really cathartic for me to see this. Buck tropes that bother me.
This is a dude learning lessons that I learned at like 20 and 21. And
which is
like that's what it's about, which is fine.
About how old he is. He's only 6 months out of college, right? So he's probably like 22.
Right. I find it to be like which is part of the reason I actually kind of like it, is because it's very believable angst. As far as I'm concerned,
like that, I think I forget if they said if it was like 6 months or a year after graduation. It was
there's a time skip at some point. I can't remember when the time skip is because I've seen all of this that's available.
I think it's 6 months because in the first episode it starts
out at 6 months.
In the first episode, the character says, "Why are we having a reunion at only 6 months?"
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because, like, again, having kind of gone through that 6 months of not being where you wanted to be after college, that's like a weird and hard time. And it's not that long a time, really, when you, like, you know, in the grand scheme of things, but it's a very formative time.
I did it for 4 years.
But like
and then
at
I
the
went to law
time,
school.
were you like, I'm an outcast?
No,
from
I definitely-
society.
No, definitely
No.
not.
Yeah, no,
No.
'cause no, he
No,
can
but
take
that
that and like shove it up
also-
his ass.
Well,
I
that
agree.
also is a much more Japanese thing, I feel.
It is. It is being part of society, being social is a thing that has greater importance.
Mhm.
And so being an outcast and not being social is a
Well,
thing
his,
that you
I mean,
that
that
somebody would
line in
observe.
particular wasn't in response to him not being social. It was just in response to him not being where he wanted to be, and was sort of was fabricating this
Mhm.
like very depressing existence that wasn't actually his life. I
Yeah.
think, as is shown by his like coworker, and his coworker
When
cracked me
his
up.
coworker calls him on it.
Yep.
His coworker's great, and especially when his coworker's like, remind me again how you're so popular with all of these people. And I was like, yeah, can you explain that to me too? Like, what's going
His
on here?
coworker tells him, his coworker even tells him, he's like, you're just using all of this to like as basically a shield to keep you from being involved in the world. Like that's what you're doing. He's like, and I get it, because I do that with music. I've convinced myself I'm gonna be a famous musician, and that's why I'm happy working at this gas station, is because I can use the idea of being good at music to justify this as a stepping stone in my mind. That's why I'm here, and I know that about myself. You need to know that about yourself, dude.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from, Tzvi. I just found all the pieces around what bothered you to be satisfying enough to put up with it.
I kind of did too. That
That's
line where
fair.
he's like, "I'm an outcast from society" and stuff. That also rubbed me the wrong way. But
I mean, I like character progression as much as the next person. I just think there are more subtle and effective ways to go about it that
Mhm.
make it
Yeah.
more
Yep.
interesting than sort of using the crutch of, you know, this guy is depressed, this girl is
Emo
fun and
dude
has
is
a pet
emo.
crow, and like, let's put them together and like, ha 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 ha.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just
Now,
if
if I recall correctly, Chris was kind of on the fence about this show too.
I think what I was saying is I really don't know how I feel about listeners at the time.
Oh, was it
Oh,
listeners?
okay.
Okay.
I may or may not have commented on this one. I think I might have said that I liked this one or that it surprised me or something. I forget.
I must have gotten those confused then.
Mhm.
Apologies.
No worries.
So, shall we get into ratings then?
Sounds good.
let's do it.
All right, Dean.
yes, this show, like I said, I've watched all of it. I really enjoyed it. This dude is again learning lessons that I learned at 20 and 21. So it's interesting to see that happen. Scenario interest. I think when we read the synopsis of this, everybody kind of rolled their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Which is probably the appropriate response. I wasn't excited to watch it. I and going into it, I was like, this is gonna be boring, and it's gonna be discussions, and no one's gonna be interesting. I was happy to be wrong about that, but I was not interested in the actual premise of it. The production, I thought it was pretty. I thought it was really pretty. Some of the scenes, actually, you know what? I think that's from a later episode. It's pretty. It's a very pretty show. And I really like the look of it. Okay, this blew me away though. Because you don't often see this, and it seems like a small thing and unimportant, but
I know what you're gonna say.
It stood out to me. Do you?
Yep.
The level of detail in the show is bar none one of the greatest levels of detail I've seen in anime. In the environments, which are interesting, sort of minimalist matte paintings that are beautiful, but also the bottom of our main character's jeans
Okay,
are
I
worn
didn't
out.
know what you were gonna say.
What did you think I was gonna say?
That he actually like smokes his cigarette.
Yes. The level of detail in the show is so perfect. It's like the world actually feels alive.
Also, speaking of cigarettes, unlike Poet in Woodpecker Detective's office, we don't get a to indicate someone smoking a cigarette, which is not how cigarettes are smoked.
And not how it sounds, and it's not anything. It's wrong. So that stood out to me in that show as well. I hated that. But yeah, everything in this, all the detail in this show is there, and it makes the world feel alive and beautiful and cool. So I'm gonna give it a point for production. The storytelling did impress me. It's rare that shows that are conversations will do that for me. I've hated almost every show we've had where the episode is just conversations. But this show, I liked the characters enough. I was interested enough in the story that it I'm gonna give it a point for that because I watched all of it. I enjoyed it, and I was interested to see why because I watched all of it. It's a 4 from me. The only knock against it being the fact that their premise sounds dumb.
Yep. Did you have a title for it?
No, I didn't. I only had a title for the first show because I forgot to make them after I watched it.
Fair enough. All right, then for me, Sing Yesterday for me, episode 1. I want to bum some death sticks.
You don't want to sell me death sticks.
Did the premise interest me? I'm just gonna, where'd my tab go? A story of love and humanity, following 4 boys and girls trying to live their best lives through hardship and turmoil in a small town on private rail line just outside of Shinjuku. Minor misunderstandings lead to big complications, and their various feelings become entangled. A story of daily life lived 49% looking back, 51% looking forward.
Oh God.
Yep.
Yep.
It sounds awful.
That sounds so bad.
So did the premise interest me? No, not in the slightest. Did the production impress me? Yeah. Really good attention to detail. Like Dean said, to add the spaces like looked like spaces like the convenience store and the back room of the convenience store where the employees change and the park that they're in. Other human beings exist in this world, in the bar and in the park, and they're like doing things that people would be doing in those places. The bar is on the fucking floor, isn't it?
People existing in the background of a show is impressive to us. Like but it is rare. It's rare to have a living world in a show like this.
Did the storytelling impress me? Yeah. We've covered that pretty comprehensively. Did I enjoy the first episode? Yes, very much so. And am I interested to see more? Yeah, I'm probably gonna do that after this, actually. So a 4 for me as well.
Nice.
Tzvi?
Sing Yesterday for me, episode 1. When I first started watching this, I didn't read a summary for it. I didn't read any sort of synopsis, so I was going into it completely blind, and I thought it was going to go in a completely different direction than it did. I didn't realize like basically everything we're watching is like slice of life type stuff, but this I like. Okay, so way more interesting premise for a show. If anyone wants to like take this idea and run with it, and what I thought was going to happen is that like this dude shows kindness to crows all the time and then like meets this girl and she has like a crow friend, and like I thought it was going to turn out when she was like, oh, we've like met before, I thought she was going to be like a fucking crow that he helped and she like magically transforms like into this girl and it's gonna be like a really interesting story, and then it turns out it's not even remotely close. So
so the crow, the way to make this show better is to make it the crow.
Yeah, like make her the crow. And then like, you know, at some point he like discovers it and like has to come to terms with it and whatever. But yeah, no, so I guess the premise of depressed dude, I guess now knowing what it's about, of depressed dude meeting like a depressed girl, but also whatever. The premise didn't interest me. The production I thought was fine. I mean, sure. Yeah, no, people smoking cigarettes is not something I pay super close attention to, but I did.
You
They
wouldn't
actually smoke them down.
Yeah, you wouldn't until you've just seen every anime where someone has a cigarette that's lit that just stays full length forever and never develops any ash on the end. And
yeah, it's terrible. The level of detail given to smoking.
You should have to pay attention to. It's literally that's why I finished with the bars on the floor, because like everything they did are things that should be done in a reasonably produced show.
Maybe anime just really into e-cigs.
It's really bothersome.
The production, I'll give that a point. The storytelling did obviously didn't interest me. So I did enjoy it and would not be interested in seeing more. However, I would be interested in seeing a show where the girl turns out to be a crow, and then he has to come to terms with magic is real, and what are the implications for my life. Who knows? Maybe she takes him out of this boring job into the crow world, where who knows what the fuck is possible.
You're truly free of society.
Now you live amongst the crows. You want to go back home yet?
All right, Chris.
All right, sing Yesterday for Me, episode 1, How Confessions Actually Go. Did the premise interest me? It's weird. I think because I didn't remember the sort of written pitch for it. So if I look at the premise as kind of what the show presented, especially in the early part, I think post-college life, real world drama, but with crows. Maybe, yeah. I don't know. Because actually, to Tzvi's point, I did kind of get especially early on, a little bit of a almost kind of mystical sense about the character, because she was acting very differently from what we've been seeing, at least so far in the show, and the fact that she has this apparent kind of connection to the crows and stuff like that. I was almost wondering if it was kind of a sort of shamanistic kind of thing,
right?
But then it turns out that
they wanted you to get that vibe.
Because there's also something too, if we look back to last season with Inspector, they mentioned too, it's the missing the left leg is kind of one of the ways that you sort of in various mythologies pay for wisdom or something like that. So the crow with the broken leg, maybe that's symbolic of something. Of course, Odin is known for having a couple of ravens on his shoulders, and so maybe just the presence of a corvid, is that the word I'm looking for?
Yes.
Indicates wisdom or spirituality or something like that. Anyway,
real fast.
Yeah.
Thanks, Elias, for the host.
Hey, thanks for the host. So
sorry to cut you off.
The show got me interested quick, honestly, and so I think for that I am going to say it interested me, even if it's nothing really special on paper. But the production impressed me, yes, for all the reasons already talked about. The characters were animated great, even if you sort of extend it to the performance of the voice actors and stuff like that. Lots of great. But between the VA and the way that the characters are animated, everyone really did feel alive, and the world felt lived in and stuff like that. So that was really good. Did the storytelling impress me? I think I'll say yeah, if only just because they took a fairly straightforward, just real life drama and made it interesting. And I thought, again, the characters were all great. I'm going to say yes there. Did I enjoy the first episode? Yes. And it made me interested to see more. Probably just because I was impressed with it. I think that it's going to be worth watching. So I believe that is a 5 overall for me.
Damn, nice. That brings our total score for the show to a 14 or 70%. Sorry, Elias. Yeah, that's all the shows we have to talk about, which means it's time for the thing that you've all been waiting for. The tournament arc.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important message. Tournament arc! Tournament arc! Hi! It's a fucking tournament arc! Tournament arc!
Unlike the discussion section, which is fucking free-for-all, this actually is kind of structured.
It is!
Yeah, this is the structure of it.
Welcome to the AniFiles tournament arc.
which will determine our most and least watchable shows of this season. Right now, we're in the round robin stage, where each of the shows in today's group will be matched up against every other show, and we'll vote for which of the 2 shows we would rather watch, not necessarily which one is objectively better. The show with more votes wins, and ties are possible. The 2 shows with the best win-loss record will advance to our 12-show playoffs at the end of the season, and the grand champion will be required viewing for our hosts prior to the season recap. The show with the worst win-loss record today will advance to our 6-show losers bracket, and our host will also be forced to watch the winner of that bracket, our least watchable anime of the season, prior to our season recap. Now, without further ado, let's kick off round 1 of today's group play. This might also be a good time to mention that last season we ran a contest that we're probably going to do again this season, which is whichever listener makes the best predictions on our combined winners and losers brackets, combined score, I should say, on those 2 brackets, gets a custom A&V made by me. So I'm working on those from last season right now. It's a lot of fun. Basically, you get to choose an anime, choose a song to set it to, and I will make it. Restrictions apply. So round 1, matchup number 1. Shachibato, President, It's Time for Battle versus Sing Yesterday for Me. Which would you rather watch?
Yesterday.
Yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday.
Same. That is a 4-0 in favor of yesterday.
The no contest.
I wonder
Like,
what
watch
show
this,
is
like, really
advancing in the
shitty show,
losers
or-
bracket.
Alrighty, round 1, match number 2. We have Woodpecker Detective's Office versus Listeners. Which would you rather watch?
Listeners.
Listeners.
This is hard, actually. Sorry to take so long.
It's all good.
I know how much this decision weighs,
It really does.
and I want to really be discerning. Woodpecker Detective's Office, I think.
And I'm going to say the same. So that is a 2-2 tie.
Tie.
We have a tie.
That was real weak. Hang on. Tie.
Hey.
Tie.
All right, round 2, matchup number 1. We have Sing Yesterday for Me versus Woodpecker Detective's Office.
Yesterday.
Yesterday.
Woodpecker Detective's Office.
And I'm going to say Yesterday in this case. That is a 3-1 in favor of Yesterday.
D-Fresh, thanks for the follow. I don't think the alert triggered, and I don't know why. I'm sorry.
Round 2, matchup number 2. Diary of Our Days of the Breakwater versus Shachibato, President, It's Time for Battle.
Diary.
Breakwater.
Yeah, Breakwater.
And Sam, it's a 4-0 in favor of Breakwater. Round 3, matchup number 1. We have Woodpecker Detective's Office versus Diary of Our Days of the Breakwater.
Breakwater.
I think Breakwater.
Or which 2? Breakwater and what else?
Woodpecker.
I'm gonna say Woodpecker. It's either being bored listening to one dude just
Oh, there's
talk
the alert.
forever, or it's being bored watching someone fish. Like there's no winner here.
This kind of comes down, I think, to mood and kind of like, do I want to actually engage with something or just like have something relaxing on in the background? But usually I don't put that on anyway. So I think I'm going to have to say Woodpecker. So it's a 2-2.
Tie.
We have a tie.
Round 3, matchup number 2. We have Listeners versus Sing Yesterday for Me.
Yesterday.
Listeners.
This is hard for me. Shit. Given that I actually did watch Yesterday first, I think I'm gonna go with Yesterday. But I put on Listeners as soon as I finished Yesterday, so like,
There you go. And for me, I think Yesterday is pretty much the clear winner in my mind. So it's a 3-1 in favor of Yesterday. All right, round 4, matchup number 1. We have Diary of Our Days with the Breakwater versus Listeners.
Listeners.
Same.
yeah, Listeners.
Yeah, and I think Listeners does have more interest, more potential. So that is a 4-0 in favor of listeners. All right, round 4, match number 2. We have Shachibado, President's Time for Battle, versus Woodpecker, Detective's Office.
Woodpecker.
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 And Sam, that's a 4-0 in favor of Woodpecker. Our 5th and final round, matchup number 1, Listeners versus President, It's Time for Battle.
Listeners.
I didn't even register what you said before President It's Time for Battle, but not President It's Time for Battle. Whichever one isn't that.
Is the answer.
Listeners.
Listeners.
Yes.
Yeah, listeners for me too.
And same. So it's a 4-0 in favor of listeners. And our final matchup of the day, Sing Yesterday for Me versus Diary of Our Days at the Breakwater.
Yesterday.
Fuck, do I want to be bored or depressed?
Depressed is always the answer.
Oh, okay, so yesterday.
Yeah, to be fair, depressed is an emotion. If you want to feel anything.
That's a 4-0 in favor of Sing Yesterday for Me.
All right, and now I hit F5 because just Firefox hates challenge. My specific setup of Firefox, which almost certainly has to do with either the ad blocker or the JavaScript blocker, but I don't care. Okay, so advancing in the losers bracket, our least watchable show with a perfect 0-4, Shachibado, President, It's Time for Battle.
See you in hell.
Surprising no.
We will see it again, I'm sure.
Legitimately a contender for worst of the season.
Oh yeah.
Our second least watchable show with a 1-1-1, Diary of Our Days at the Breakwater. Our third least watchable show is the way I'm going to phrase this because of my personal opinions, with a 1-1-2, Woodpecker Detective's Office. Wait, yes, a 1-1-2. I said that right.
Mm-hmm.
And then
the last one you said 1-1-1, it was a 1-2-1.
Oh, okay. Well, this is just wrong for me. Then I'm going to screenshot this to prove that I'm not stupid.
Okay. For what it's worth, I think when you refreshed, it was still processing when I had said finish.
Yeah.
So it's possible just to have been updated.
And so what was the last? It was that and yesterday. So, okay, yes, because so I did Did I do listeners? Or advancing in the winners bracket, our second most watchable show, Listeners, with a 2-1-1. And then this is also showing up wrong for me, but it will be our most watchable show with a perfect 4-0, Sing Yesterday for me. I'm pretty happy with that.
I am too. That seems like a proper ranking for these shows. I feel like all the good shows are in one bracket. We normally don't have shows that are this watchable all at once.
True.
I think C's got at least a couple of potential ones, but we'll see. Yeah.
I've heard a lot of mixed things about Tower of God. Yeah, we'll see. What happens next? The outro is what happens next. This has been episode 93 of AniFiles. We're getting real close to that 100 mark, and we still haven't decided what we're gonna do.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah,
thanks for joining.
Thanks for being here. But you want to go ahead and where can people find you on the internet?
I guess Twitter is where I'm most active at Transient Gamers. Occasionally I stream on twitch.tv/Transient Gamers. But most recently, what I've been working on is actually a new podcast with Ryan.
Hey, yeah.
I have.
What? Have you talked about it at all?
I have a little bit.
Okay.
I'll let you explain it from your perspective, which is probably the same as mine, but.
I was just gonna do the intro of being like, our podcast is called Our Lie in April, which is a podcast about the anime Your Lie in April. And the premise of the podcast itself, it's a limited series. It's only as many episodes as as many episodes of the anime exist. So it's only going to be 22 episodes. So it's sort of like we're never going to hit that 100 episode mark, at least for that. So The sort of the purpose of the podcast is twofold. Number one, I, as a result of the amount of times I've been on AniFiles, I've just been like, there's so much anime I have not been exposed to, and there's so much I don't know about it. And so I approached Ryan being like, hey, what anime is really important to you? And maybe important to anime as a whole. And that's probably like a good starting point. So he came back with Your Lie in April, and we're basically going through it episode by episode. Him having seen it countless times and me seeing it for the first time. So I'm sort of bringing a similar perspective to what I bring to this podcast, where I sort of don't have, my bar's not on the floor because I'm like, this needs to live up to some scrutiny. So
I have a modicum of self-respect.
Exactly.
So the podcast is not out yet, and so I can't give you like a link for it, but I can tell you that it will most likely be at deliberatesound.com/OurLineApril. I already own the domain Deliberate Sound, which is sort of the like umbrella under which I want to try producing more podcasts. But yeah, the idea is also like it's a very heavily produced podcast. So there's a structure. There's it's only going to be 20 episodes each time. So it's like, 2 to 3 hours worth of discussion that gets cut down into something that you can listen to while washing the dishes or whatever. And if you're watching along with us, it may be like a little bit more meaningful. But that was very long-winded and probably longer than anyone will listen to. But that's what I'm currently working on.
Nice.
That sounds excellent. I love limited run produced stuff like that. I just finished listening to Raise the Dead, a show that Justin Robert Young did about the 1960 election and how it compares to 2016 and a bunch of interesting things like that. Produced limited run show that covers an interesting thing. There's an audience for that, and I'm it. So like,
well, that makes me so happy to hear it, because like when I came to Ryan with the idea for this podcast, I was like, I don't actually know if anyone's ever going to listen to this. I'm going to put so much work into it. And it's probably more than I'm ever going to get out of it. But like, I want the experience of heavily producing a podcast so that I can understand pacing and what keeps people's ears interested and things like, and as an audio engineer myself, with, being stuck at home and the work sort of like going downhill as far as like how busy I am, this is an opportunity for me to tackle something that I know I can make sound good. And I'm curious to hear how people react to it.
That's
Cool.
excellent. Like I said, that's right up my alley for things that I like listening to. I think it's because they're kind of similar to radio drama and things of that nature. When you kind of produce it and cut things down to tell a narrative, even if that narrative is a conversation, it's interesting to me. I like that stuff. So I'm excited to hear it.
This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts or wherever great podcasts are distributed. And we live stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/Exercy. If you like us, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/AniFiles. Because even though we're on Twitch, I eventually got to the point where I was like, I am intentionally not going to stream more so I can get partnered, because I don't actually want people like throwing money at us. Because I'd feel kind of guilty about that. But people,
I couldn't take it anyway because contractual obligations.
And also, I'm pretty so. Well, it doesn't matter. Never mind. We have a Discord. ! Discord in Twitch chat, or there will be a link in the show notes or in the description of the video. We talk about anime, music, video games, and combinations of the above. You can follow the show on Twitter @FilesAnnie. And we are a product of alternative internet radio. You can find us in our other great shows at airad.io. And you can follow the network @AltNet Radio. Chris already mentioned the contest, but when we go to do our end of the season tournament, all the shows that make it out of the group stage, either in the most watchable or least watchable brackets, you can make predictions on those brackets before we play it out. And the highest points wins. Last season, we had a win by default because only one person entered. So, you know,
Your chances are very good.
literally throw a prediction together, like, and
Yeah,
enter.
really, like, even if you don't listen to us the entire season, like, just take a guess and you've got a decent chance, because like even we who are the co-hosts and know each other and went through the season have a hard time predicting these.
I think
Yeah.
on one of the brackets, the one contest entrant actually outscored me. My predictions were bad.
And things change over time too. Like if there's really good feedback later on in the season about a show, if we're hearing really great things about it, we might go back and watch it. It might become our favorite of the season, even if we didn't particularly like it that much in the group stage. So,
or vice versa can also happen.
The opposite can also, a show can become very bad.
I've been your host, Ryan. You can find me on Twitter at Xerxes and on AnyList user Xerxes. Chris, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at KRUEGER_Chris. You can also hear some of my past podcasting work on the backward-compatible.com podcast, Games and New Media with a Splash of Academia, and the Doc and Kruger cast, the official podcast of Doc and Kruger Games.
And Dean?
Yes, I can be found on Twitter at DinoFiles, just those letters, DinoFiles. My show, DinoFiles, can be found on Alternative Internet Radio or wherever great podcasts are distributed. Mediocre ones too. That's why I would be there. You can also read the things that I write sometimes at the Rogue File, roguefile.com.
It's really satisfying to me, the taglines that you've come up with for your podcast, Chris, and just the way they kind of roll off the tongue and have that rhythmic structure.
Yeah, thank you.
I like sing along every time you go through it. All right. We will be back in 1 week. How does time work? 2 weeks.
We'll be back at some point. I will be getting my final schedule this weekend, probably after the show, actually. So I will be able to let you guys know what episode I'm going to have to be gone for.
All right.
If I had to guess, it would be the next one. Probably, but we'll see.
Cool.
Well, we will be back in 2 weeks, potentially sans Dean, which makes me sad. To talk about,
there's a lot of fucking shows I'd love to talk about next week.
to talk about Gleipnir, Hakushan Daimao 2020, My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom, Gal and Dino, Argo Navis from Bang Dream, and BNA. All right, AniFiles cast members, let's say our catchphrase. In the end, nobody cared what I said. Yep, that. Those just happened.
Out.
Thanks everyone for hanging out on Twitch. I will check and see if there is anyone I want to host. But I have been spending less and less time on Twitch, so that's unlikely. So
I've been in like an unfollowing spree, actually.
I
like
did
my
that just a week ago. I went in and actually I unfollowed like 90% of the Overwatch streamers that I used to follow. And actually there is. Invarial is streaming a playthrough of Persona 5 The Royal.
Hey.
So we're gonna host him up.
He's our guest next week.
He is our guest next week. So tune in to. It's always a good time when Invarial's here because shit just goes wrong in the most hilarious way.
Last time wasn't too bad.
No, last time wasn't too bad. All right. Peace.